Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conversations Over Coffee. I'm Steve Wernick, Reb Steve, one of the rabbis at Beth Congregation, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And today's guest is Rakefet Ginsberg, who is the new CEO of Masorti Israel, of the Masorti Movement, the Conservative Movement in Israel. Rakefet's no stranger to the Masorti Movement. She did work as the assistant director. Is that what the position was? Assistant director for many, many years. Then she took a break. And as Yizhar moved on to the WZO, Rakefet moved into the director's chair. So Rakefet, brucha haba. Welcome. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you. Toda raba. Happy to be
this might be as close as I'm getting to Israel this year. It's like, I'm going through withdrawal. I haven't been in over a year. It's like the longest spell I've been without visiting Israel since 1995, I think, 1996.
Wow.
Anyhow, let's start with the breaking news. I happened to see across my notifications just in the last half hour that the Supreme Court of Israel has finally ruled on the case that the Masorti movement brought starting in 2005 of 12 people who converted according to the Masorti movement in Israel, but who were not able to be recognized as members of the Jewish people or as citizens of the state of Israel as a result of the rules in the Ministry of Interior, which is dominated by the Haredi ultra-Orthodox parties in Israel's government. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this ruling and why it's so significant?
Hi. First, I'm happy to be here and happiest that it's today. I mean, it's really fun that we can open with good news. It's
Right.
not an obvious thing, So after 15 years, actually 16 almost, that it's in court, while people who immigrated to Israel convert to Judaism by conservative and reform Judaism, and the rabbi who converted them, they could not recognize by the country, by the state, as citizens. You can convert in Israel by reform or conservative rabbi if you're already a citizen, which is kind of problematic because your ability to be a citizen if you're not Jewish is it's almost
Limited.
impossible. Right.
Limited, if not impossible. That's right.
Very limited. So if you want to convert and you want to come to Israel and you want to live as an Israeli citizen, you have to do the conversion outside of Israel. It's kind of funny that you rabbis in US, you rabbis in Canada, rabbis in Europe can convert Jews, but the same rabbis in Israel cannot do the same thing. So it was in court. We had about 10 or 15 people that got to court together. And finally, after 15 years, we can say that they can be Israeli citizens, equal Israeli citizens.
And why is this ruling such an important win for Masorti and Reform Judaism in Israel?
I think the most important thing is that we are recognized as a stream of Judaism that is legitimate and has the same responsibilities and opportunities in some things, like the Orthodox Judaism in Israel. Since the Orthodox Judaism in Israel is the dominant one in the Rabbanut, in almost every Israeli institute. I mean, that's the stream that is more recognized, or the only stream that is recognized by the country. This is an opportunity to be recognized as conservative and as a Reform Jew in Israel. It's not an obvious thing that they recognize the streams, the liberal streams in Israel.
Some people may be surprised by that, that in the Jewish state, not every stream of Judaism is recognized by the state. There's certainly, the Israeli government will say this all the time, there's freedom of religion and even Judaism, right? If people want to form conservative reform or other types of Jewish communities, they can do that. But in terms of the matters of personal status, conversion, weddings, burials, adoption, divorce, only the and Jewish identity itself, only the Rabbanut, which is controlled by the ultra-Orthodox today, has authority for that. So the significance of this ruling is that it's another notch of recognition for the progressive movements within Israel.
It's painful, I must say. I'm my oldest son is 27, and he has a girlfriend for a few years, and they're talking about marriage, and the fact that they don't want to get married by the Rabbanut. I mean, he grew up in a conservative family. He doesn't want. They want to have a conservative rabbi, and unfortunately, they won't be recognized as a married couple by the state. Jewish couple, both are Jewish, both grew up Jewish in Israel, and they're going to have a Jewish wedding, which will not be recognized by the Jewish state. It's painful. It's really painful.
They have to get a marriage license. I saw a statistic a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's still current. Maybe you know the current number. That something like 30% of all marriages are now happening outside of the state of Israel. And there's even a rising number of people that are not getting married, but are living together under common law unions, just because they don't want to go to the Rabbanut for weddings.
It's 30% that do not get married by the Rabbanut. Not all of them go to outside of Israel to get married. More and more couples do not go outside of Israel to get married anymore. They just married in their own way, secular or Jewish another way. That is not through the Rabbanut. They're not signed as a Rabbanut. They're not signed by the state of Israel as a married couple. There are some things that they lose because of that. I mean, some of their Shikhut, I lost the word, benefits, they lost because of that. But still, they do that because they don't want to go through the Rabbanut. They don't want the Rabbanut to be part of their life. They don't want to divorce, unfortunately, if there's a need for that, to go through the Rabbanut. So they prefer not to be signed as a married couple in Israel. They're married and they can't sign as a married couple. If they go outside of Israel and married by you, for example, as a rabbi, and come back to Israel inside as a married couple, they can do that. But then if God forbid they have to go through divorce, then the Rabbanut will get into their life again. So the only way not to have the Rabbanut in your life, if you're an Israeli Jewish citizen, is not to be signed as a Jewish couple here. It's painful. It's painful.
Yeah, especially since the Rabbanut has such an authoritarian hold on these matters. I want to move away, though, from the negative the negative aspects of the challenge of Masorti Judaism in Israel, which is ongoing. The state of Israel. I want our viewers to know that the state of Israeli politics are difficult as it relates to true religious pluralism, even Jewish pluralism within the Jewish state. But even beyond that, the Masorti movement in the last decades has been making huge inroads into Israeli society. How many communities are there now? How many people do we estimate are getting involved with them? And what do you think is behind the growth of engagement with Masorti Judaism?
So we're happy to have about 85 communities around the country, from Kfar Vradim in the north to Eilat in the south, in cities, towns, villages, all over, different communities. Some of them are very big communities, some of them are smaller minyanim, but they have their own communities of Israelis who look for pluralistic halacha, Jewish life in their community, and they have practiced their Judaism in a conservative or Masorti community. We see more and more communities, and we see more and more people who connect with those communities. I don't think the COVID year is the year to estimate numbers. It's all so much complicated. But Yom Kippur, before the COVID, we saw thousands and thousands of people who come to our communities. Usually we say if we open a place, you can expect about 100 and 150 people in the place, even if they didn't know that there is a congregation there before. I mean, they just see that the opportunity is to sit all family together, and they join many times, which is fascinating because we said what we said about Orthodox way here. More and more people, a lot of people think this is the only way. You know, I grew up in this country. I was born in this country. My parents were born in this country. I never knew till I was over 35, almost 35, that there is another option than Orthodox. I didn't know. And I consider myself as a very aware, involved person in the community.
Were you brought up as a secular Israeli or with an observance in your household?
Observant in a way. Both my parents grew up ultra Orthodox. My father grew up in Vizhnitz. It's
Wow.
a very, very Orthodox community. Yeah, and they both did their way outside of the Orthodox way and they consider themselves as secular, but I think in any other aspect they were more tradition.
Masorti, traditional.
You know, the funny thing is that I've never been in a synagogue until the age of 34. I've never held a siddur until the age of 34. But we did have Shabbat, Erev Shabbat dinner, all family together. We did have kiddush and candles and holidays, of course. And but for my parents, going to the synagogue is something that we don't have to do. This is not our place. And I think this is the thing that I grew up with. This is not my place. The fact that I found a place that I can come. I have 3 boys that I can celebrate Shabbat with my boys and my husband, all family together. And I can read from a siddur. I hold the siddur and I didn't, it was amazing. A Jewish woman who grew up Israeli, who knows Hebrew, back and forward, can do that.
How were you introduced to Masorti Judaism? What was it at 34, 35 that brought you into that space?
My husband grew up in Argentina as a Conservative. So he told me, behind the sea, somewhere there, behind the ocean, there are communities who sit all family together, and they drive to the synagogue. And when they finish their tefillah, they hang out together. They have some kind of life that is in between the Orthodox way and our secular life. And every time he said that, we thought, nice. So sad that we don't have it here. And that's how, And when my oldest son became 10, we started to talk about his bar mitzvah. And it hit me that I won't sit behind the curtain in his bar mitzvah. I won't be the woman, the mother that's sitting there without the opportunity to be near my son, without the opportunity to be with my family, because all of them are men and I'm the only woman in that situation. And we started to look for something that's going to be more pluralistic. And I met a woman that was in a Shikhut, and she said, I'm dreaming about a reform minyan. And I said, I don't know, reform, whatever. If it's together, call me. I'm going to be there. A year later, she called me and said, I don't know why I have your number, but I'm having Kabbalat Shabbat in my living room. Do you want to come? And I joined. And that was, eyes opening. We sit together. I didn't know any word. I didn't know any tune. I didn't know anything from those prayers. But the first time I felt that's for me. I belong to this place. A year later, we went to Shikhut, and we were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was a shlicha in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I realized that there are so many opportunities and I can choose. It's not either or. I can really choose. And I chose the Conservative synagogue. And when we got back, we knew this is our place, and we looked for one. And I joined the movement here. And since then, the Roman is there.
So that's like, we hear that story all the time about Shikhut. So Shikhut is really, it's a double benefit. It helps the communities Chutz La'aretz develop their connection to Israel through Israeli emissaries that come and spend a year or a couple years with us, bringing Israeli program and culture to our communities. And then at the same time, it opens up Israelis' eyes to multiple expressions of Jewish
I
life
have
in
a good
Iran.
friend that says that the Shikhut is actually have an hidden agenda, that they send Shlichim to come back more Zionist. They send
Yeah,
Israelis to come back to
yeah.
Israel more Zionist.
Well,
And in
that
many ways, it's right.
in many ways
They
that's true.
and
That's
I love
right.
my country more.
That's right. Let's talk more about the Masorti movement. Unlike the culture chutz la'aretz in the diaspora, especially in North America, the notion of membership is a foreign thing. So, here people form communities and they belong to the community, and they give an annual contribution in some way, shape, or form. In order to support that community. In the Israeli experience, so much of Jewish life is supported by the government through their taxes, that this is part of the problem in terms of legitimacy and fair share, so to speak, in terms of governmental support, because you just don't get that in the Masorti movement. So how does the movement support itself?
We have to understand that we're part of a Jewish state, and the fact that we're part of a Jewish state means that it's not just that people are not used to pay for things like that. They need their Jewish services, and they're more used to have Jewish services all around them. So one of the most important things for us, for people to get to know, not like me, just at the age of 34, but earlier, that there is another opportunity, is to give our services to everyone who looks for. If you want to join a prayer, you don't have to be a member. You just can, open the door and get into the synagogue. It's open for you all the time. If you want to have a bar mitzvah, you can do a bar mitzvah. If you want to get married by a conservative rabbi, you're going to get married by a conservative rabbi. We also hold the egalitarian section in the Kotel to give the opportunity for everyone, for every Jew who wants to pray in an egalitarian way. The ability to be there for everyone is the most important thing for us. So this is something that we put, above everything else. When we have to get money, because we can't live without it, to provide all of that.
In Kemach ein Torah, as the Mishnah says, right? Without flour, there's no Torah. And they were talking about greenbacks.
Unfortunately, although we try,
Yeah.
sometimes you just, but
if we had a Rumpelstiltskin.
we do need help, and we ask for help from many people in Israel and outside of Israel. People who think that egalitarian Judaism in general is important in Israel, that conservative Judaism in Israel is very important, and the idea of having more than one option in this Jewish state is the important thing for him or for her, and they support us. Jews from Israel, Jews from outside of Israel, people who seek for the opportunity to influence on the Israeli reality, because that's what we're doing. We're influencing the Israeli reality, the Israeli society, by having those services open. It's not that we don't ask for money from people who have bar mitzvah. Of course we do, and they do pay for some, for some of the things, but that's not enough. It's not the level of membership like many people pay in diaspora. It's for the good and for the bad. And we're still working through, or trying to go through the government to get some help from the government. It's a long, as we started this talk today, it's a long process. It's a long process. We hope that one day it's going to be so obvious to have conservative Judaism in Israel, like everything else, it's going to be free and subsidized by the government. But until then, we have to help ourselves to do that.
That's I think a really important point, that until then we have to support ourselves. If we don't do it, nobody's going to do it. So let's talk a little bit then about what are the successes that you can point to at this moment of the movement, and the things that, if there were more resources, could grow its impact towards that larger goal.
We see more and more communities around the country, which means more and more people that are open and want to join and see this opportunity of having this Jewish life around them, and join those kehilot. I think as many kehilot as we can have. My vision a few years ago, I said that I hope that every Israeli can just get out of his house, walk for about 10 to 20 minutes, and get to an egalitarian synagogue. Okay, for now, I have to drive about 25 minutes to the closest synagogue, conservative synagogue near my house. It's about 25 minutes driving. It's not, and I live in a city that there are 128 synagogues, all Orthodox. So to be able to join more and more synagogues, we have to have more and more opportunities and synagogues like that around the country. We need to have more and more rabbis that can inspire people. You know, we see that especially
in the 85 kehilot that there are now, how many rabbis are there working in those kehilot?
About between 20 to 25. It depends what day we're talking, but a lot of them are half-time or part-time. Right. Very few are full-time, and unfortunately, it's really hard. It's really hard.
And 50% of the budget, 50% of the budget for those rabbis still comes from the movement itself, right?
35% of the budget.
35% comes from the
movement itself.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So those rabbis, those communities are really dependent on the movement in order to be able to support themselves.
Right. More than that, usually we even start with higher than 35. We start with about 80 to 90% of the subsidizes by the movement, and it takes, I can say, about 10 years to get to 35%. It's a long process.
So it's a big commitment for startup.
Right. Community community has to build herself. It takes time. It takes time to build the resources, the local resources, and it's a process.
So one thing then is right now there's about a little less than 30% of half-time and full-time rabbis that are working those 85 communities. So one thing to both support the communities that exist, but also to grow more, is you just need more rabbis.
We need a lot of rabbis. We need
a lot of rabbis.
And we need good rabbis. We need to be able to have good rabbis. You know, it's important every time, in every place, but I think this time, because of the politics that is around, because we're facing this hard year that we all face all over the world, because of the political crisis that people experience here, we need local leadership. We see that more and more, and after this or during this process, during this COVID time, the general leadership, I want to say the politics or politicians. I don't know, I don't know enough about the politics in Canada, but I know here politicians, machzevim, I lost the word for that, disappointed you again and again. It doesn't matter who you vote for. We're all disappointed. From the right and from the left, we're all disappointed from our politicians again and again for different reasons. And people in such a long crisis look for a local leadership. We need local leaders, and rabbis are local leaders. And this is the time for them to rise. This is the time for them to be there. We need rabbis that can speak up. We need rabbis that can be community leaders and help people to find their way after such a complicated and it's a hard year.
And I know from my experience that the most successful Israeli rabbis are the ones that can build relationships with the municipalities, with the mayors and with members of the town councils and so forth, because so much of the resources ultimately get allocated locally, especially like buildings, right, and space. I want to move also to Noam, because I'm a big believer that one of the ways in which you engage people is through the youth, and especially if we want them to find out about Masorti before they're 35. Noam, the youth movement is a way to do that, and Israelis love their youth movements. Noam now is been for a couple of years now has been officially recognized by the state because it's reached a certain number of participants. Tell us what's happening with Noam and the opportunities for growth there.
Noam is working very hard now when people are under, this COVID and kids cannot come. So they get to those kids' homes and their places. We have about 17 branches of Noam around the country. More and more kids that join. We work now with kids from 3rd grade and up, And we also started this year, even though it's a hard and complicated year, some programs with kids from first and second grade as well. So, because we know how important it is for them to have some activities and some social activities outside and with them in this time of fear. Noam, it's kind of amazing to see how those kids grow up with one hand holding Judaism and a siddur, not in the age of 34, in the age of 12 or 13 or 14, how girls can put talit and tefillin and learn about it and feel totally equal to those boys around them and understand that this is their Judaism, not less than the boys' Judaism, that their way, not less than anybody else. It belongs to them. The pride that they have having their Judaism as part of their life is really amazing, and it's always, exciting to see that. I'm always very excited to see how they pray together and feel like that's there. It's not something that they feel uncomfortable with or feel that it's somebody else that need them or ask them to do. It belongs to them. Noam holds kids, which is I think quite unique in Israel. Kids that grow up in houses that are more observant, and also from houses that are more, families that are more secular. You see a lot of secular families that send their kids to Noam. And I think this is the only youth organization or the youth movement that is Jewish, that Judaism is part of the ideas, the main things in that, and still have a lot of secular kids. Secular kids will not go to an Orthodox youth movement. They will not go to a place that they won't feel like if they're not observant at home. But but they can be who they are. They can come from wherever they come, and they're accepted, and they're part of. And a lot of families even think that I can't give that to my son because I don't know, or I can't, or I don't want to, no matter what, at home. And Noam is the way for my child to learn and get close and feel comfortable with Judaism. A lot of times, Noam is the only opportunity for those kids to get to know their Judaism, to get close to it, to feel comfortable with it. And we see thousands of kids every year in the Machane, in the camp, in the summer camp. This year, we didn't have a summer camp, and we're getting ready for the next one that we really hope to have this summer. I don't know what the situation will be, but with the vaccines and everything, I hope that we'll have enough, we'll have the ability to at least have a camp this year. But it's quite amazing. They did a protest about 3 months ago against the government that didn't open schools. Noam organized kids from all over the country and all over the organizations, ultra-Orthodox organizations and totally secular organizations. They were the only organization that could hold everybody together. When we talk about Klal Israel, it's kind of funny, but when you look at Noam, you understand, you see what Klal Israel is. You really see Klal Israel in front of you. And I think this is very unique for this organization, very special.
We have a question that came in from Facebook from one of our viewers, and that is, what is it that Israelis want from their synagogues?
Oh, a lot of things that you look for in your synagogue. They look, first of all, from inspiration. They look for somebody to help them to feel that they can connect with something that is above and beyond their daily life. They look for community that many times practice many things or important, that there are things that important for the community like for them, or the same like them. They're not necessarily look for friends as the same, Jewish friends as the same as Jews around the world, since they have Jewish friends in their workplace or in their neighborhood as well. But if I look at myself and think, what do I want to do in the synagogue? I want my kids to feel comfortable with other kids that practice the same, Judaism in the same way they do. I want people to pray with. I want people to talk about or study with. It's not an obvious thing to have everywhere. And also, I think if you have young kids, you want to raise your kids in a way that they're going to feel comfortable in every synagogue. And conservative synagogues, or Masorti synagogues in Israel, is exactly the place for them to do that.
We're running out of time, but I can't let you go without talking about the Special Needs B'nai Mitzvah program, the only program for special needs B'nai Mitzvah in Israel. Tell us what the Masorti movement does for that.
The Masorti movement started about 30 years ago, a program that is for kids with special needs. It's actually, the idea is to have access for everyone, for every Israeli to Judaism. And it means that even kids with disabilities, or also kids in different, in different problems, when they need to go to the Torah, since the Orthodox synagogues most of the time will not let them. This program teach those kids to their bar bat mitzvah, teach them about Judaism, help them to get connect with Judaism, and eventually have the ceremony for them in our synagogues. Those, if you haven't seen a ceremony like that, this is probably the most emotional ceremony you'll ever see. Those families, a lot of times, since they grew up in Israel and they learn that there is no way for their child to be able to call to the Torah, this is the only time, or the first time in their life, that they feel they can have their child, do something that is normal, Jewish normal thing that every boy or girl in Israel can do. And this is very, very unique. There are a lot of schools in Israel that open their doors, so we do that in schools for them, and we teach them, and we have hundreds of kids every year that do this ceremony. I mean, only this year, and it's a Corona time, we had about 30 ceremonies in this complicated situation.
Wow.
So people do not give up on that. I mean, it's so important for them, and you can see that a lot of people can postpone their ceremony or their simcha. Those kids will not.
Thank you, Rakefet. I look forward, hopefully in the near future, to being able to welcome you to Bet Tzedek in person, and to continue this conversation about the Masorti movements, its successes, and the opportunities for future success. Just to summarize for those that are watching, the Masorti movement is the egalitarian, progressive halachic conservative movement in Israel. Israel today is the largest Jewish population in the world. If we want Israel to truly be the Jewish homeland for all the Jews, then we have to really make sure that we're continuing to invest in a Judaism that's recognizable to us and provides Israelis the maximum opportunities to be engaged in a modern, rational Jewish approach. The Masorti movement, as you heard, it's all about the kehilot, rabbis, dynamic rabbis, special needs programs, the youth movement, and of course it also operates the Ezrat Yisrael, which is the egalitarian section of the Kotel, without COVID, more than 60,000 annual visitors coming to there. I know that I was involved with Yizhar in the negotiations with the government, and we look forward to one day for a government actually fulfilling their promise.
That's another bagatz that we're
that's
having.
Another bagatz, another Supreme Court ruling. Today, as we started, was a historic day with the Supreme Court ruling that conversions performed in Israel for non-Israeli citizens must be registered as Jewish, and therefore can qualify for Israeli citizenship under the law of return, a really important victory for the Masorti movement in Israel today. If you want to support the Masorti movement in Canada, you can contact Masorti Canada, and if you're in the United States, Masorti USA. If you want to support it, if you happen to be watching from any other country in the world, you can direct your support directly to the Masorti movement in Israel. Next week on Conversations for Coffee, join me with the now not so new, but still new leader of the Green Party in Canada, Annamie Paul, a very dynamic, interesting leader who happens to be a woman, Black, and Jewish. So a very interesting intersectionality of Annamie's identity. But we look forward to welcoming her, finding out who she is, and what are her goals for leading the Green Party into the future in Canada. That's next week at 12:30. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Rabbi Warnick, thank you, and thank you, Bet Tzedek, for this host. Thank you. I had a great time. I hope to see you in Israel soon. I really hope it's going to happen soon.
May it be so.
A lot of health.